rock and roll. Good morning. Okay, let's try this again. Good morning. There we go. My name is Wes Groover. I'm coming at you all the way from sunny South Florida, where it's super sticky hot, and we're going to have some fun today. How many people, by show of hands, how many people came out here to learn something new about generative AI? Okay, if you didn't raise your hand, go ahead and just get out, because the doors are back there, because that's really what this is about, right? We're here to learn about generative AI. We're going to kick it off. Some folks are still finding seats. Please, ma'am, don't push, don't shove, just find a seat. Jokes. You guys thought this was going to be one of those boring, technical AI things where you come in, you didn't know you were going to in for jokes today, did you? Okay, great. This closed captioning is really new. It's freaking me out a little bit. What am I saying? But let's kick this party off. Come on in, have a seat. We got a time schedule. This presentation is about 90 minutes, and I was just informed there's no break. Can you all handle that? All right? Hopefully we'll have some kind of snacks later, but I don't want the lack of breaks or snacks to impact my evaluation at the end of the day, right? They're like, that dude kept us in there for 90 minutes. They were giving away donuts and coffee. We got nothing. It's all his fault. I'm not involved with snacks, just so you know. As we start thinking about generative AI, really, these are the three big questions that we get all the time. The three big questions that kind of come out are, one, is this generative AI thing a threat, or is it an opportunity for my business? Second question we always get is, listen, how exactly is this thing going to help my business, and how can I gain a competitive advantage if this thing is for real? And last but not least, what about security? Can I use my data securely with Gen AI? What you should think about is a lot more. We're going to answer these questions and more over the next 90 minutes, and we're really going to dig into each one of these aspects and really give you guys sort of a really generalized overview of what generative AI is all about. By the end of this session, you should really be able to describe how artificial intelligence is being used to revolutionize your practical AI applications. You should be able to describe some of the AI models, how they work, and have at least like a working knowledge of some general business use cases. We're going to discuss those in a little bit more detail. You should also be able to walk out of here with the ability to show how your data organization is going to be able to find success in generative AI applications. And I think of all the things on this list, I think this is the one that most people are interested in. People agree with that or no? No? I don't care about my business. I don't need that AI. It's just a fad, man. It's like the internet back in 1998. Everybody knew it was a fad back then, right? It's going to come and go. You don't need that internet. It's just, you know, them kids using that internet. Come on, man. What's it all about? And really, last but not least, we're going to also talk about some of the legal and ethical considerations that you might not have thought about that could absolutely positively impact your business in the future. Turns out this is going to be super important when it comes to managing your data. So we're going to dig into that as well, right? That's a little bonus content that we're adding on there. Here's our agenda today. We're going to kick off with kind of a quick introduction about what generative AI is and what it's not. We're going to talk about large language models, or LLMs, and how they work and what they're, we'll kind of peel back the curtain a little bit, or if you will, get up under the hood and talk about how they're going to work. Then we're going to move into finding success with generative AI. And this is where we're going to take a deeper dive into some LLM applications. If you caught my show yesterday, I did a 4-hour show on just RAG, which is retrieval augmented generation, where you can use your own data to put into the context of a thing. And then yesterday afternoon, we did a show that was 4 hours on how to use multi-stage large language models to create applications. So we're going to just scrape the surface of these things, but know that there's a lot more to this, all right? Finally, we're going to discuss some of the important aspects to consider when we talk about ethical considerations and legality. And again, this is one of those things that kind of goes unanswered. Sometimes it goes on, people don't really talk about it, sort of like the dirty little secret of the industry, but it's definitely something that should be exposed and should be talked about. Cool? Does that sound like what you signed up for? Yeah? Anybody looking for something else? You're trying to catch Dune 2? That's in the next theater. All right? So, generative AI basics. When we introduce or explore the basics, what exactly is generative AI? Why is it making headlines all over the place? What are some popular use cases? Why all the hype? Everybody's heard about the hype, right? Today, we're really going to dig into what is the reality behind the hype? What is the reality when it comes to actually the rubber meeting the road? And how can I use this new technology to impact my business, all right, and grow my business? But do that in an ethical and responsible way as well. First of all, what is generative AI? Well, that's a great question, all right? At a highest level, it's really a subset of artificial intelligence. You can think of the artificial intelligence as, a multidisciplinary science field that really has, the goal is to have systems that can emulate or maybe even surpass human level intelligence. Now, first question I would like to point out here is, are we there yet with that phrase? Are we surpassing human level intelligence? Somebody up front said in specific domains. Kudos to you, ma'am, because absolutely. The answer, I would say, it depends, okay? And I would back up a second and I would say, well, how do you define human level intelligence, okay? All right? Are you the smart person at your local pub trivia night? Because this technology will smoke you, okay? When it comes to just basic retrieval of going out and getting facts, really good at that. Making smart business decisions, it's only going to be as good as the data you give it and only as good as the reasoning around that's built into your application, okay? Would I trust this thing to do open heart surgery on me or run a robot to do that? Maybe not yet, but we're getting there, right? In one of our use cases yesterday, we had a really good question, and the question was like, okay, we have this generative AI stock trading application, and we did an extended lab around it, and did all the things that you have to do to make a decision. But the fundamental question was, should I buy NVIDIA stock? And at the end of the day, I caution everybody to say, listen, there's a lot more that goes into this than just looking at the financial numbers, just looking at Wall Street, looking at what other people are doing like that, you can have all the data in the world, and then 10 minutes from now, the CEO of NVIDIA gets hit by a bus. What happens to their stock? I don't know. Probably isn't going to be good for the company. What I'm getting at is there's a lot of variables that you can't account for inside of a large language model, all right? So generative AI is just a subset of that. So we're going to learn from existing data, make predictions. And again, this is something that this technology is really good at, right? It's really good at taking a data set, all right? Large data sets, terabytes, petabytes, exabytes of data, and being able to look through it and analyze it and make predictions without really being explicitly programmed to do that. We're going to talk more about that today. Okay? Generative AI is really built on a specific type of AI models, and we call these generative models. They're really mathematically approximate to the underlying data. They can take things like images, text, audio, video, and ingest that, okay? And do all kinds of things with them, run all kinds of algorithms on them, and do pretty interesting stuff. We can also generate new images based on things that are similar to our data set that we've ingested. We could do style transfer or editing. We could do translation. That's a great use case. It's very effective, and you're seeing that being used today. Question and answering. This is the one that's probably most popular. Anybody here never used a tool like ChatGPT? Anybody? By show of hands? Anybody never used it? It's okay, you can be honest. This is a safe space. All right? What's the value of tools like that? they're pretty good at answering questions, pretty good at writing papers, updating your resume, building job descriptions, writing poems, telling stories, answering questions in interesting ways. But what I would submit to you is they're also really only as good as that prompt engineering or the effort you put into the prompt, and are only as good as the questions you ask. Also, never forget, they're only as good as the data behind them. How often is that data updated? Does that data include any of your business data in their data set? The answer is no. So we're going to talk more about that today as we get into some other things. Of course, speech to text is out there, text to speech, natural language processing, all easy peasy stuff. So we've seen a huge explosion right now in the world of AI. Lots of people asking the question, why now? And it's really what's led to this sudden kind of shift and why we are focusing so much on it right now. Well, a big part of that has been the wide variety of large data sets that have now become available. Also, not for nothing, we've seen a huge explosion in the availability and the kind of upgraded capability of computational power. Everybody's heard of the axiom Moore's Law? Does everybody know what Moore's Law is? Where are my geeks at? Come on now. Moore's Law is that, since the 1960s, really since the 1950s, about every 18 months, we've doubled the speed of your basic CPU that's available. And that's pretty much held true for the last 50 years or 60 years or so. Some people would argue it's slowing down. But at the same time, like every technology, as the technology gets bigger, better, faster, more, what happens to the price? It drops, right? The first cell phones that you could get in the late 80s were $2,500, right? Now you can get a cell phone for free when you sign up for a plan. Same thing's happening in the world of computational power. We now have advanced hardware, GPUs, shout out to NVIDIA, right? And all this stuff is getting more cost effective because we don't say cheap. That has a negative connotation. It's getting more cost effective. You can get orders of magnitude bigger, better, faster, more clusters to throw horsepower at these problems than we ever have in history. That has been a game changer for this, right? Years ago, I worked in the industry. I worked for VMware, and we had some products that we ran on Hadoop, some large-scale, big data things. And I remember, a base Hadoop cluster, if you just wanted, out of the box, 100 machines just to spool up a cluster, bare minimum $1 million. If you didn't have $1 million, forget about it. No, you're not happening. You're not playing the game. That was bare minimum cheap seats to get in the stadium, $1 million. Now, you do the stuff for free, right? To a certain extent, we got open source data sets, all that stuff. The last thing that really has opened things up is the idea that we've got a whole lot of innovative models that have come out now. We're talking about generative adversarial networks, GANs, transformers architecture, human feedback loops, all kind of really interesting things that are using different techniques around reinforcement learning. These things have become mainstream, and a lot of them are still open source. That's a fancy word for free, right? So at the end of the day, things that cost a huge amount of computational power, took a huge amount of effort, and, oh, by the way, took a huge amount of programming. Somebody's done all of that for us now. And this stuff has ultimately, what this summarized is democratizing this technology. When we say democratizing, it doesn't matter who you are, where you're at, you got a smartphone, you can use this stuff. Cool? Big question a lot of folks right now are going to ask, why should we care? Why is there so much suddenly hype around it? Well, the big thing is that the accuracy, effectiveness, and ability and the availability of these models is now better than ever, right? It is true. They're powerful enough for use cases that weren't even feasible a year ago, okay? Models are readily available. Many of these models are open source, and again, they require real powerful horsepower, but all that's being offered for free. Let's pause for a moment and think about what you might have heard on the news, whether it's social media, podcasts, other sources. When we're talking about Gen AI, we're pretty confident that everybody can probably recall some example of how generative AI is being utilized in some fashion, but you might even have in mind a few, but we're going to discuss a bunch in the next upcoming slides. But one notable use case of Gen AI is text-based agents and text generation, right? Gartner Group, our big crystal ball company, Gartner, has really recognized that really having medium to high business value is being quite feasible with some of the latest tools. So we're going to talk about some of the tools that are available out there that are some really what we call low-hanging fruit, things that you can easily get involved with that could even be impactful in your business starting today. Content generation, all right? This is something that's huge, right? Marketing and ad content, right? You can go out to some of these tools right now and say, create me a marketing campaign for XYZ product. Here's some details on the product. Here's some details on my customer. Here's some details on the market. Poof, do it. You're going to get back pages and pages of content immediately, right? You guys have probably seen on little ads coming through on your social media feed like TikTok and Facebook saying, let me help you marketing your business. We'll create 100 videos for you in 4 hours. Anybody seen that kind of thing? It's insane. It's happening all around us. Question and answers, obviously, is probably one of the biggest use cases right now. It's also the one that, English teachers around the world or literature teachers around the world are all the most concerned about. Oh, these kids are all cheating with ChatGPT to write their papers. Maybe so. If you ask me, I'm going to go off script for a second, and I'll tell you, I think we're missing an opportunity here. Teachers shouldn't be telling kids, you can't use ChatGPT because you're cheating. Teachers should be showing kids how to use this technology to write better. Let me take you back 40 years when I was in the 3rd grade. My 3rd grade teacher was Mrs. Wallachie, and Mrs. Wallachie was teaching us how to do, you guessed it, long division. And I remember at the time I had a fancy Casio calculator, brand new. And I had brought it to class, and all the kids gathered it around. What's that? I'm like, you can do math right here on this thing called a calculator. They all gathered it around. They're like, that's super cool, dude. This is the mid-70s, okay? And I remember Miss Wallachie saying, hey, put that away. You need to know, Wes, how to do long division because you're not going to have a calculator with you everywhere you go for the rest of your life. Don't be crazy. And I'm standing here with 2, actually 3 devices that can be used as calculators, and I didn't even try. Kind of go with me everywhere I go, right? Quick show of hands. When's the last time you sat down with a piece of paper and did long division? In the last 10 years? In the last 5? In the last 2? Every day. Your job. What are you, an accountant? What do you do? You live in a cave, you don't have access to a calculator? Right? By the time I was in college, I had a fancy HP H309. If you did not know how to calculate that and use that reverse Polish notation, you would not pass an engineering class. You needed to know how to use an engineering calculator to take physics, to take calculus, to do the graphing and all that stuff. So my words to Mrs. Wallachie are, maybe you should have been showing those kids how to use calculators back in the day. Yes, having an understanding of how to do long math, that's great. More sympathetic I could not be. But in order to get a job today, you need to know how to use a calculator. You need to know how to use a computer, right? Same way we went the way of cursive writing. Listen, cursive is beautiful. It's a great thing to know. But if you want to get a job today, you need to know how to use what? A computer keyboard. Hello, if you can't use a computer keyboard, you can't type. When I was in school, typing was optional. It was extra credit if you wanted to take a typing class with actual paper, whiteout. Remember that stuff? I'm getting blank stares from everybody. I should get out of the 70s, come back to 2004. Content personalization, great for that. Virtual assistants. We already talked about storytelling, poetry, creative writing. These kind of things are incredible, right? Super good at telling stories. Again, also based on the prompt. Explaining things that might be complicated. You want to have fun with ChatGPT? Here's a prompt for you. You could say, Explain quantum physics to me. What do you think you'll get back from that? Yeah, you're going to get a 40-page PhD-level research paper that's going to explain quantum physics in nauseating detail that you probably don't understand, which I wouldn't understand. Try this prompt. Explain quantum physics to a 5-year-old. Now, by just changing the prompt, what do you get? You get a really cool answer that's actually understandable. I learn more from using a prompt like that. By the way, my kids ask me problems all the time, and I'm like, explain this to a 9-year-old. And bam, this is what they want to hear. It's perfect. A lot of things on there. Code generation is the last one I'll sneak by there. Listen, there's a lot of hype about that. Anybody here self-identify as a software developer or a software engineer? Again, this is a safe space. You can really talk about who you are, all right? So you probably heard the hype. A lot of people say, well, check it out, dude. It was actually the CEO of NVIDIA who said, if I had kids coming up today, I would not bother to teach them how to code. I wouldn't waste my time. He said that in an interview. I don't personally agree with that, but what he's trying to say is that a lot of these tools are going to be able to code phenomenally well. Will they be able to code better than the best people? Absolutely not. Not when it comes to solving problems. Will they be able to generate a lot of pretty good code quickly? Yes. Will they be able to take a junior SDE or somebody right out of school or a low-skilled developer and allow them to generate a whole bunch of code quickly? Yes. That's the differentiator we're seeing today. But here's the thing that I'll tell you guys every single day, and I'll say this again before we finish today. That technology that we have available to us right now to do code using generative AI, right now, today, it's the worst it'll ever be. Today, it is the worst it will ever be. It's only going to get better because part of machine learning is we learn from our mistakes. If we get corrections, they can learn. If you correct it, they can learn. It will get better. Will it be better than the best human? We'll see. Some other cool use cases for generative imagery generation. Have you guys seen this? You played with this at all? Has anybody done the generative AI headshots? Yeah, online? Where you take a horrible photo of yourself and then look like you're wearing a suit, right? Kind of cool. This is really going to be a big thing. It's a portion of it, and it's kind of interesting because one of the I saw a meme the other day, a joke that came through, and it said the promise of technology was that the technology is going to come and it's going to do my housework and do my laundry and do my dishes, so I can spend my free time doing art and writing. Turns out the opposite today is true, that the technology is really good at doing art and writing, and we've not figured out yet how to make it do laundry or dishes yet. Video synthesis and animation, scene generation. You've seen a tool called Sora? Mind-boggling. Absolutely mind-boggling. You can give it a prompt. Create a video of Batman flying through the city and fighting the devil. And it'll just create a video. It'll create this movie. It's ridiculously cool. Cool but useful? Cool not useful? Remains to be seen. Audio generation. Let's face it, people like me, dope on a stage, probably going away. Why? She said, because I'm expensive and I'm not tired. First of all, I'll have you know, young lady, I'm cheap and I'm full of energy. But you got a point there. The idea is that, you can get these things to develop a persona and tell jokes, do the whole thing. Maybe not as interesting and engaging as I might think that I am, but we'll see. 3D generation is actually happening pretty cool in the world of animation. There's an incredible amount of use cases coming in here right now. Let's turn our attention to another topic that's pretty relevant in the big data and AI space. We call that synthetic data generation. This is something we want to talk about. This allows you to some kind of cool, pretty powerful advantages when it comes to increasing your data set size or advancing or enhance the data set diversity, maybe even protect real data. But let's talk for just a second about what this is. It's a way that you can take an existing data set that may or may not be complete. Let's give an idea. What would be something, an example, if not complete? I've got a scenario that is taking place. Like I want to use a self-driving software. It's a car. I want to program a car to self-drive itself. In order for that car to be fully autonomous and self-drive, it's got to be able to recognize different scenarios. Okay. If I was living in Florida and I was programming a car to drive, I would never have the ability for the scene on the right here. What's the scene on the right all about? It's snow. How is the data set going to understand how to see and understand snow when the lines on the side of the road are no longer visible? How is that self-driving algorithm going to be able to react to that? I'm going to have to come up with a way to create a data set that includes that so that that thing can understand it, right? I'm going to have to come up with different scenarios. How do you handle a person in the road? How do you handle a stopped school bus, right? I need to be able to enhance that data set and do that. Again, it's super important for object-determined adversarial scenarios. I don't know if you guys heard a few years ago, one of the very first high-profile fatalities in a Tesla full self-driving. It happened in Virginia to a gentleman. He was driving actually kind of on a country road with some low rolling hills. And as he came over one of the hills, by the way, there was some dispute about whether or not he was sitting in the backseat and sleeping. Not been determined yet. Came over a low rolling hill, and there was an 18-wheeler that was turned sideways in the road, was going into a driveway. As the car came over the hill, that 18-wheeler's trailer was completely white. And what it did is it formed a perfect background that looked just like what? The horizon. Blew right through that thing at 75 miles an hour. The software was unable to detect the difference between that white trailer looking like the edge of the tree line and the edge of the sky. It just looked like sky. I'm not worried about it. Keep on going. Don't even slow down. Some other use cases. Maybe these things can help us save the world one way. Valuable use cases in businesses. Some super interesting things in drug discovery, product design, and material design, chip design, architectural planning, urban design. Have you guys seen, I don't know if you get these ads or not. I get these ads all the time. So at one point I clicked on like, oh, I want to look at tiny houses and it seems pretty cool. I had a friend who built one and I was like, yeah, what's tiny houses all about? Now I get ads all the time from tiny houses, right? So, that's AI at work. But one of them I see all the time is like, oh, take a tour of our new house. And what's interesting is like 99% of these tours that you're taking of this house, the house doesn't exist. It's just an AI generated 3D rendering of the house. It's pretty good, it's got lighting and shadows and it looks great, right? A little sun coming through the windows and stuff, but these days you can pretty much tell, right? I mean, most of us are pretty savvy nowadays. This technology is not quite to the point where it's fooling us yet. What did I say earlier? Right now, this technology is the worst it's ever going to be. Not fooling us so much, but it will. In this section, we're going to kind of dive more into kind of like what is behind the scenes, what's under the hood that makes these things go. We're going to talk about large language models, LLMs, and really it's one of the hottest fields right now in generative AI. We're going to talk about, again, we're going to begin with just understanding LLMs, what they are, their structure, and then we're going to explore some important business use cases that they're used for. Let's get into it. Are not hype. They're usually, this is what's the game changer here, right? If you look at the idea behind this, people are saying all kinds of hype things. It's a once-in-a-time generation shift. Open source chatbot, 90% quality, smaller, bigger, faster, more. ChatGPT can beat 90% of lawyers at passing the bar. You guys remember that movie with Tom Hanks and Leonardo DiCaprio? What was that? Catch Me If You Can? It's supposed to be based on a true story about a guy who was running around impersonating pilots. He impersonated a lawyer. In one of the final scenes of the movie, he said, by the way, tell me, how did you cheat and pass the bar in Louisiana? And what did the kid say? What? He said, I didn't cheat. I just studied and went and passed it. He was 19 at the time and never been to high school, dropped out of high school, never went to college, never went to law school. Pretty cool. What is an LLM? Well, it's pretty basic. It's really, we want to understand generative AI. We've kind of talked about, it's a branch of artificial intelligence that focuses on creating new content. When we talk about generative AI, we have large language models and foundational models. Both of these are kind of trained on massive data sets. And they're really based on deep learning neural networks, like some sort of transformer architecture. But first, let's talk about what it is. You could take a significant data set, all right? You could compile that data set, and then what we're going to do is we're going to train it. We're going to iterate through it, all right? And we're going to start working through all the permutations we can that kind of make sense. In a nutshell, they're taking advantage of that generative power of AI, that horsepower, that computational horsepower we talked about earlier, and they just excel mostly at processing words and processing language. One of the things that we say all the time is a large language model is like a super, 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 super smart autocorrect. How does autocorrect work? When you're typing in, you see this even when you're typing at on a Google search, you'll start you'll start typing something and it'll finish this, it'll show you what you think you're saying this. Or you can be in a Word document, or you can be in anything, and it'll start to autocorrect. What is the core of autocorrect? How does that work? Is it just really smart? She said, no, it guesses. And you're absolutely right. It guesses, but it guesses using math, and it guesses using high probability. Let me give you an example. If I give you a quote from a Shakespeare play, and I said, to be or, you would say, where the hell did you get that from? Where did that come from? You ever written down on some notes? Experience. In your experience, you've heard that before. You've heard it a million times. You might have never read the play Macbeth. You might have never seen it on Broadway, but you've heard that phrase, to be or not to be. Those words go together. The cool thing about large language models is I can take the text of every single Shakespearean play, poem, novel, book, writing, whatever, throw all that into a data set and compile it. And when we compile it, what we're really doing is we're converting text to numbers. We'll get into this in more detail in a little bit, but in a nutshell, we're converting text to numbers. Because remember, what do computers really understand? Do computers understand words? They just understand numbers, binary, on or off, ones and zeros, man. When we think of large language models and we say they're smart, what are we really saying? We're saying they're really good at doing math. They're not smart at understanding words. They're really good at saying, hey, if I said to be or not to be, there's a 99% chance the next word in that sentence is going to be this word. And then the next, or this word. If I said to you, good morning, good day, good afternoon, you start typing like in your text on your phone, you say good, based on the time, it's going to go morning. It's going to try to autocomplete that. Does it know that it's morning? It could based on time, but what it really knows is that 33% chance you're going to say morning, afternoon, or evening. Math. It's just math, right? The good news is, with the larger data sets we have, massive amount of data sets, the more information that's in there, the more information that's stored, the more information that's been compiled, the, in air quotes, smarter the language model appears to be. But what it's really doing is the better math it's going to be. Plus, as we train the models, we autocorrect. The autocorrect, and we slap its fingers, we say, no, you didn't get that right, it's this. No, you didn't get that right, it's this. No, you didn't get that right, it's this. And we do that millions and millions and millions and millions of times. And now the model gets much, much, much better, and its responses are even better. They're grammatically correct, and they sound great. So how do they really work? Input, encoded into numeric representation. When I said we changed it to numbers, that's called tokenization, all right? You don't get too hung up around that, but really it's an encoding component, takes a large amount of text, inputs and converts it to tokens. So you can see a sentence in this case is divided into smaller chunks. We call that chunking. Don't get hung up on it. But at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're converting to tokens, and those tokens are embeddings. We put those words in similar meanings in a vector space. All that is taken and can be given some pre-trained transformer model, and those we can give it human feedback. This is where we slap it with a ruler when it gets it wrong, correct it, and ultimately comes as output text. But again, there could be billions and billions of billions of parameters that we use to train it. This is how the model gets, in air quotes, smarter, right? At the end of the day, is it truly smarter? Well, it seems pretty smart. Really good at doing this kind of stuff. It's really good at predicting what next words should be. Somebody wants to go back a slide? So the idea behind tokenization is we're taking text. The question was, can I explain tokenization? We're taking the text, like I could take a PDF document, right? Or I could take, that's the full text of a Shakespeare play, Macbeth, the full text of it. It's in a PDF format. I take that text, I can bring it in. As I'm ingesting the text into the large language model, we're taking and we're chunking up those sentences and we're giving them numeric values. All right, we're changing text to numbers, because remember, computers don't really understand text, they understand numbers. And then those numbers are created through what are called embeddings. And we create a vector database based on similar things that go together. This is where we start building relationships between words. To be or not to be, 90% chance this should go with this, or not. Shouldn't go with that. Should never end a sentence on a preposition. You should always start with a capital letter, all these kind of things. That's really, we have a whole 4-hour class on just large language models, how to build that. We had a full day class on how to create applications with multi-language language models, and we get into nauseating detail on tokenization, size limits, all these kinds of chunking and all that stuff, but it kind of goes beyond the scope of what we're doing here today. Cool. So there's a whole two kinds of LLMs out there, open source as well as closed LLMs. What does that mean currently? I mean, they're really developed by different companies that are being used out there. Some are proprietary. A really important aspect to remember here is that the size, they're indicated by the number of parameters, has significantly increased in many years. One of these you've seen here is a tool called Dolly. It's an open source LLM. It's created by Databricks, of course, and it provides a really curated list of recommended LLMs for specific tasks. We strongly advise you to consult this page right here, this model, before you kind of select a model for your case, your use case in Databricks. It's also important to note, different models are trained on different data sets. They have different things baked into them, and they're going to be good at better things. Have you seen that thing, ChatGPT for law? It's out there. What's it for? It's for lawyers. They were saying it's better than 90% of the lawyers out there passing the bar. It's got all those texts that they learned during law school all crammed into it. Case law, Supreme Court cases, use case, all that jammed in there. But the big difference is, look at the different release dates on these. All these are relatively new. Of course, Mosaic now is partnered with Databricks as well. The model size, what they're about, it is absolutely positively, if you're going to get into business or you're going to create your own, make sure you understand what the base kind of line is and what it's being used for. In the next few slides, we're going to talk about some practical use cases for LLMs, right? We're going to start by kind of examining some of the common use cases. We're going to talk about how they're applied in the real world, all right? Here's a common task. We already talked about content generation and augmentation. Again, we're generating content and contextually relevant text. Key phrase there, contextually relevant text. What does that mean? If you ask the model a question, you give it a prompt, I'm going to give you back information that's relevant, wrapped around close to what you asked for. Let's talk about creation and augmentation. Some of these things are really good at coherently and contextualizing for a lot of different purposes. It's kind of like having an AI assistant to kind of produce your engaging content kind of really good. Summarization sounds self-explanatory, but this is another skill that these tools are really, really good at. TLDR, too long, didn't read. Does anybody get a daily TLDR, like news summary, sent to their email or to their phone? NPR News Flash, something like that? Yeah, it just makes your life easier. These technologies can be really good at summarizing things. Take something that's big, give you the Cliff Notes version, you consume what's important. They still use Cliff Notes these days? Kids use Cliff Notes? Anybody know what Cliff Notes are? Thank you. Man, you guys making me feel old. Stop it. So those of you who are uninformed, Cliff Notes were this little book in a yellow binder you could get that was the short version of a book. And you could read it before you took the test or write a paper. And you'd know all the major themes and all the characters and what happened. Didn't have to actually read the book. Boom, right? Now I guess what you use? Wikipedia? I don't know. Do the same thing? Question and answer, I talked about this. This is great. We're really good at this. We can take a block of text, a block of information, and we can query it and get information out of it. This is similar also to like taking an open book test. Remember when you were back in school and took an open book test? You're at the end of the semester or whatever, your teacher's like, hey, take the book with you. You got an hour to answer these 500 questions. And the book is this thick. What's the challenge there? Knowing where it is, finding it. Good news is computers are really good at that. They're really good at indexing and finding things. So they're really good at, if you give it the textbook, it can jam through the answers very quickly and pretty accurately. Machine translation, converting some text from one language to another, really, really good at that. It also has an understanding of grammatical rules in multiple languages. It's getting better at that. It's actually getting much better at that, right? You guys seen these devices now that's like it's like a hearing aid you can wear that you can talk to a person in one language. They respond to you in another language. The hearing aid will hear the second language, convert it to your language in your ear. You can talk and it will broadcast in the second language. Insane. These things is just existing technology. It pretty much does it in real time. Pretty cool. Classification. Being able to categorize topics and sort through information, spam detection, sentiment analysis, fraud analysis. Sentiment analysis is pretty cool when you're going out to do an analysis of like news articles, right? If I was going to try to make a decision about whether or not to buy NVIDIA stock, one of the things I could do is I could curate, go out, pull off the internet, search for and find, give me a year's worth of article that mentions the company NVIDIA, pull all those articles down, put them in a language model. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to summarize each one of those articles, and then I want you to give me a plus or minus whether that article is positive or negative about NVIDIA. Sentiment analysis is just binary, two decisions, good or bad. And then from that, I could get an output that tells me, yeah, the preponderance, 93% of the articles that were written about NVIDIA in the last year are all positive. Turns out, what's happening to NVIDIA stock these days? Going through the roof. It can also do things like name entity recommendation. It can extract names of persons, organizations, cities, dates, and stuff from a text. And one of the examples we did in our RAG class yesterday for retrieval augmented generation, we did a lab where we asked a large language model, we asked it a question about a person. But the first time we asked the question, I used a made-up name of a person that I knew did not exist. And I said, tell me about this person. And a base model, without any training, without any further prompting, came back and started making up all kinds of cool stuff. This person was born here, they did this cool stuff, they did that, they did this, they went to school here, they contributed to this, they built this is their legacy is here. What is that called? Hallucination. We'll talk more about that later on, but it's one of the things that you kind of have to worry about here. Tone and level of content. Funny, is it humorous? Is it complex? You can do sentiment and all these kind of things. You can even, not to get into politics, but you can also get the political tone of an article as well. Is this article left-leaning? Is this article right-leaning? Is this article centrist? Right? And of course, a lot of things, math goes into that as well. let's talk a little bit about some of the specific outputs for translate those into kind of practical business use cases. So customer engagement. This is a great one. Everybody, we're all customers in some sense, right? We're all customers for some other company. And as business owners, business people, we have customers, right? At the end of the day, this is a huge thing when it comes to personalization, product content recommendation based on behavior and preferences. Probably one of the simplest examples of this would be Amazon.com or Kindle or Audible. What happens when you buy a book on Amazon or you buy a book for your Kindle reader and you finish it? What's the first thing, when you finish, what's the first thing that pops up on your screen? What's the next thing that pops up? Thank you, a recommendation. Oh, you like that book? You'll like this. 85% of the people who like this book love this book. Here's your next book to read. And if you're an avid reader, what are you looking for? You're looking for your next book to read, right? So that's okay. You're okay with that. That's not spam or any kind of guerrilla marketing. That's just good business case, right? If you like this, you'll like that. Also, whenever you buy anything on Amazon, what do you see at the very bottom? When you get ready to check out, what do you see like right below it to the left? Similar items, and you're also going to see like similar items, but at different prices and different number of days it takes to get to you. And then you're also going to see people that bought this also bought that. You're buying a new grill, you're going to need a grill cover. You're buying a new griddle, you're going to need this spatula to go with it. People that bought this bought that. Recommendation engines, these things are fabulous at that. Behavioral professions. Feedback analysis. Feedback is super important to us. Did you ever buy a big ticket item through any online provider without reading the reviews? Buy that $500 vacuum cleaner and it's got a 1.8 rating. This thing sucks, man. I had to return it. It was broken in the box. And 1,000 reviews and it's got 1.8. Are you going to buy that? Probably not, right? For the most part, for big ticket items, we tend to pay attention to those reviews. Do we not? Do you not? What's really funny is if you go into Amazon right now, you go into the app, it'll actually tell you, here's a summary, an AI-generated summarization of 13,000 reviews. Most people tend to like the size and fit of these shoes. Other people complained about the width. Some people said that they didn't like the coloring, but they loved the durability and quality. And then it showed you 4.8 and 4 stars, and it showed you the real details. What it did was AI was summarizing that, doing feedback analysis on 13,000 reviews and telling you, yeah, most people are okay with that, right? That's kind of valuable, right? What's the first thing you ask? If you're trying to buy clothing, anybody ever buy clothing online? Or do you prefer to go in the store and try it on? Not anymore. Exactly. The question, how does it fit? And you'll see that is usually one of the things that says, fit is usually spot on. These shoes tend to run a little big. These shoes are kind of narrow. You'll see that'll be in the sentiment analysis and the analysis as well. And of course, virtual assistants are all over the place now, like Alexa and your Google Smart Home and all that stuff, right? Creative writing, short stories, really good at this stuff. My 9-year-old son did this the other day. He had gotten in trouble at school during his last week of school. He's kind of fooling around. His teacher called my wife and said, hey, your son is just really not focusing. He's not buckling down. I know it's the last week of school, but he had an assignment to do and he didn't do it. So my wife was like, all right, you want to play around, kiddo? Tell you what, I'm going to give you a book to read and I'm going to give you a book report and you got 3 days to do it. Oh, by the way, today's Friday. I want it Sunday night. So there goes your weekend. He was not happy about it. Of course, his 13-year-old sister's like, dude, use ChatGPT. So Saturday afternoon, he brings his book report to my wife. She's like, get out of here with this. It was pretty good. I actually went back and said, dude, that was too good. What you should have done is say, using the persona of a 9-year-old boy, do an analysis of this book. And it started out, oh my God, this book was so cool. I really liked it when he did this and that. And it sounded like a 9-year-old boy, way more believable than the one he tried to turn in. I'm like, dude, if you're going to use technology, you got to use it smart, right? He got through it. Technical documentation, something that's really good. Writing manuals like that. Translation and localization. Blogs and social media. Another one, process automation and efficiency. This is becoming huge these days, right? You see customer support use cases. It is really, really, really a way of the future. And let me give you an example in customer support. For how many years now have you been calling a business to get customer support, and you call the 800 number, and the person picks up and it says, "Hi, this is customer support for XYZ company. This call is being recorded for training purposes." Smart companies have hung on to those recordings for 10, 15 years. Smart companies taking those recordings, doing voice to text, taking that text, throwing it in a large language model, and now what do you have? Now you got 15 years of customer support calls. Some bad, some good, but what can you distill from that? What kind of little nuggets of information could you get out of that? You could get top 10, top 20 most common questions, top 10, top 20, top 100 most best answers for questions. How valuable would that be for a brand new customer support rep you're trying to train to get on the phone? And now they have this information at their fingertips. They can type a question in and they get instantly that curated 20 years or 10 years of data at their fingertips of actual calls, actually how it's handled. That kind of information is gold. You can't buy that kind of information. You can't buy that kind of information. Well, you might be able to these days. Probably somebody's selling it. But then somebody got a hold of it, they didn't want to sell it. But that kind of information is super good. Automated customer response. You know, code generation, we already touched on this earlier. And I just want to say that, again, it's a pretty crucial role now in enhancing developer productivity. I started in this business many, many years ago as we called ourselves programmers at the time, but now we're software development engineers. Sorry, I don't want to offend you, STEs. But as a programmer, I think, and this is just me talking personally, I think that where you're going to see this go, it's going to get better. It's not perfect. It's going to get better. But I think what's going to happen is, again, you're going to be able to take an entry-level developer, make them much more efficient, much more productive. At the same time, a savvy software development engineering manager is going to be orders of magnitude more demanding about how much code you produce, right? Don't tell me that project's going to take you 2 weeks. Get out of here with that. I want it this afternoon. Get after it. Why? Why would a savvy software development manager be more demanding? Because much more resources are at this person's disposal, and you should be able to be more efficient. You should be able to crank out bigger, better, faster, more code, right? Just makes sense. We're going to take a little minute and we're going to get more into the application side of the house. And what we're really talking about here is some of the key elements for really, if you're going to have success with generative AI, we're going to kind of examine some different applications. We're going to explore some of the features that are offered by Databricks, because this is the Databricks Data and AI Summit. We're going to talk about what are some models that you could use to adopt to kind of help generate AI within your business. Cool? So modeling techniques are all over the place right now. One of the things that really makes it possible is these underlying models are really being democratized and very, very quickly. You know, when ChatGPT 3.5 came out, that was what, November of 2023. A lot of folks thought it was difficult to replicate those results, but you know, in a year, there's thousands of models that really can do the same thing and better. Prices are coming down. I mean, 10x year over year, the price that it costs to do some of this stuff or build things is pretty impressive. And now, open source models that you can get out there for free are quickly catching up to proprietary models out there. For a lot of your business use cases, open source models are kind of approaching the acceptable limits of quality, right? They're good, but what you're going to find is that building apps now, the kind of the future of where this is going, you're probably going to want, for production quality stuff, you're probably going to want to use the custom LLM. We're going to talk more about that as we kind of go down there, kind of unlocking the value of your data. Listen, there's good news, bad news here. If you get all this, your competition, your competitors are going to get it too. Everybody's going to do it. What really gives you the competitive advantage? What makes your business stand out amongst other businesses? Is it your use of AI? Bingo, said it right on the front row, your own data. It's your data that's proprietary. Go back to that use case of customer service, 20 years of calls and answers, good answers, some bad, whatever. At the end of the day, your data, your customer's data, using that data, not open source data, using your data is what's really going to differentiate you from your competitors. Your data is amazing. Whole bunch of different flavors out there. It's almost mind-boggling right now. If you're really considering building an application using LLMs, one of the first questions you have to answer is, okay, which model should I use? And really, there's only two main models we're going to talk about. That's going to be open source or proprietary. You can buy it off the shelf and go down that road. They can be used as they are. Maybe you can do some fine-tuning. Some of these models have literally thousands of parameters that you can fine-tune to as you iterate your models to change the results or tweak your results based on your needs and human readable feedback. The second option, of course, is proprietary models. This is where they're trained on extensive data sets that are kind of typically offered as like a large language model as a service. But those licenses for proprietary models have often come with some restrictions on licensing, restrictions on uses and modification. Each option really has its own considerations, and that choice really depends on your budget, your customization levels, requirements, licensing restrictions, and I'd add a fourth one and say, what sort of expertise do you have on your team in-house? That could be the limiting factor of what you choose as well. Choosing the right app. There's no perfect model for every use case, okay? There's a whole lot of decisions you have to make along the road, and there's a lot of decision points that only you can make for your business. Not one model will fit every use case, right? Some things to think. Privacy. How is your data going to be used? You're going to have to think about safety and security. Are you working in the healthcare industry where HIPAA is a real thing, where HIPAA restrictions are real? Do you work in financial services where you've got to deal with regulation and governance there? Are you operating in the European Union? Do you have customers in the European Union where GDPR is a real thing, all right? Data governance is a big deal. Data security is a big deal. Protecting your customers' data is a big deal. You can't go out and take your proprietary data, throw it into ChatGPT, and use that for results. Why? Got to read the fine print, okay? Because you're offering that data to them for free. Let's not do that. You probably find a lot of companies right now are blocking tools like that, blocking OpenAI on like customer or proprietary business-owned machines because they just don't want to give employees even that option to go out there and do that while they're at work because they don't want to have the liability. We're going to talk about that later in the show about what happens when you lose your customer data like that or you give it away. Second, quality. Understanding how that model was trained is going to be crucial as well. You got to evaluate the accuracy and reliability of the model's predictions. You got to look for information in the data set that was used for training, and you have to look for any potential biases in the model's performance. What was it used for? There's a dirty little secret like out there in the news world, okay? If I was doing sentiment analysis on news articles, all right, and I went out and I looked at 1,000 articles from 100 different news articles in the United States, and I compiled them and I did sentiment analysis and I said, what percentage of these have a neutral slant, a liberal slant, or a conservative slant? What do you think it would be like if I did 100 different news organizations? What do you think I would get in the US? Turns out in the US, there's a high propensity for more liberal news outlets than there are conservative. It's just fact. It's not blaming the media for anything. That's just like, this is just math. There are more liberal news outlets. So the majority of articles you're going to find, 60%, are going to have a liberal slant to them. Is that good, bad, or ugly? No, it is what it is. But if you're going to do something, you need to understand those kind of things are out there, that there are biases built into a lot of the things you read, which is the way it is, right? Oftentimes, we consume information because it's what we want to hear. We go to news outlets because I like that reporter. I read the article they wrote last week and I want to read what they have to say this week. I like that person, right? I go to NPR every day. I listen to it in my truck when I'm driving my kids to school. I get really good news, I think. I don't really think so much about what its biases are. It's public radio, right? It's there. Cost. Cost is a significant factor. Think about this for a second. Does your organization have an unlimited budget for creating applications? Oh, you don't, do you? Well, turns out very few folks do. If you're not considering cost as part of the factor, then you absolutely positively need to think about it. Because here's the thing, all right? You can do some of this stuff quick and dirty and do it pretty quick and do, less training, a little smaller models. You're not going to get the same quality of data. If you really and truly want to get good results, you need to have more data, you need to have longer training, and that takes time and money. And time is money. So don't kid yourself. Also, if you're going to be using proprietary data set or proprietary models, there's licensing costs that are involved with that, all right? Where you run your systems, what clusters you want to run them on is going to have a vary in size, speed, and cost as well. All right? Latency is another thing to think about. The processing time required to create the model, whether the model's response time aligns with your business needs. It could be particularly important if speed's important to you. All right? We all like to think it is. But let's just say in financial services, you're working on Wall Street, you're doing predictions on stock prices. Those things change by the minute. A stock could be on top of the world, and a minute later, it's in a trash can. It's a dumpster fire, right? Simple things. Elon Musk makes a tweet at 3 a.m. What happens to Tesla stock? It can change like that, okay? So you have to be aware of these things. Speed would be of the essence in financial services, getting it. But if I'm doing research for a university and I'm trying to do a long-term study on climate change over 20 years, I might not care about speed at all. I might care a lot more about the cost of that computational power. It might be more important to me because I'm working as a volunteer for a university and I've got a bunch of, I have a limited budget. Maybe the grant I got was for $100 and I got 20 years to do this. So speed's not important, but cost is. So it's always going to come up for a balance for that, right? Do you want the Ferrari or do you want the minivan? What do you want? What do you want? Well, how many kids can you stuff into a Ferrari? It goes faster, but it might not meet your data needs, right? Just saying. Pros and cons. Again, proprietary models. We talked about this. Large language models as a service. Again, speed, quicker, faster, starting more. Again, it's pretty easily considered existing pipelines. For the most part, the quality is pretty good. A lot of the off-the-shelf results meet most use cases. That kind of 80% thing, 75% thing, which is pretty good, right? For the most part. What are some of the cons? Well, you got to think about cost. You got to pay for every tokenized cent received over that, data privacy security. You may or may not know how your data is being used, right? Also, once you start and you purchase one of these things, you might wind up having a little vendor lock-in. If you're using a single vendor, you may not be locked in with them. As they used to say back in the day, you're pouring cement into your data center, right? Once you spent a whole significant amount of money developing one technology, maybe that technology gets deprecated. Maybe the version 3.5 that you loved is now 4.0 and still is something different. Open source, again, they are very specific to task. When it comes to open source models, you got things to consider here. You got flexibility to find a model that suits your needs. A lot of stuff off the shelf. There's literally tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of models out there. You can kind of retain some control over the data and the model information, but there's, again, some things you got to be aware of on the con side. There's costs associated with training and computation can be significant down the road. Data requirements. Fine-tuning a larger models is going to require larger data sets, and I will absolutely, as I mentioned earlier, skill sets. What sort of skill sets do you have in-house? Do you have trained people who can go out and take that the data set or take that model and do fine-tuning on it to get the results that you're expecting? That requires skilled people, right? Do you have those skills in-house, or can you build them? You can always build them, right? Pre-training models. Pre-training model really is, again, it's a concept you're willing to think about as you're taking your LLM journey, whether you want to pre-train a model or not. And essentially, it's kind of like teaching the model the basic and general nuances about any language. If you're going to learn a language, you think of pre-training as like you're going and you're reading lots of books or blogs or articles or maybe transcripts on stuff. You're really spending time watching movies, TV shows. And from all that, you're learning to speak a language somewhat comfortably. You're also learning some of the vernacular. You're learning how it's used. You're learning some informal phrases. And it's really one really good way to kind of absorb a new language. And the same thing works when it comes to pre-training a model. You really want to get it out there. You might want to become familiar with that syntax, whatever. When we go back to the LLM world, you have to be very specific about your use case, and your organization has to think about that model that you want to use. Do we want to use it for Q&A? Is it the right kind of data? Do we have the right kind of data available in the model? In the case we want to pre-train the data so we know we can look at it, we can say, here's the data that I want to use. Here's the data that I think should be as part of this data set. Now, there's ways to inject data down the road. We could get into things like RAG. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But for the most part, you got to think about this. In other words, what is going into your foundational model? What is being baked into it? You need to know that. You need to understand that. Again, fine-tuning, is that process of further training an already pre-trained model to a specific task where we adapt it to a specific use case for all application or domain. So we can take a foundational model, we can do task-specific training, and we come up with what we call a fine-tuned model. And this is a very common thing we're doing because, again, we have this large corpus of training data out there. It usually doesn't fit us. We really need to spend some time with it to kind of polish it for our use case. There's a ton of foundational models out there that can be fine-tuned for specific use cases, whether it's from text or documents, question and answer, very specialized things, specialized tuned models for question and answering, sentiment analysis, summarization, named specific things, named entity recognition. Again, there's a lot of these things out there, and it's something you really need to be aware of and understand that when you're trying to execute on a fine-tuning model. Let's just say you're trying to fine-tune a model for a specific domain, like maybe science and finance or legal, something like that. In order to accomplish that, you're going to have to use some scientific journals, financial documents, legal documents. You're going to have to adapt those models to kind of understand that specific use case. And that process is going to help that thing learn your domain-specific information. In other words, you're going to have to get out there, get legal journals, legal books, all that kind of stuff stuffed in there. Maybe if you wanted to be, an expert in answering questions about physics, you're going to have to get research papers and doctoral theses and journal articles and all this stuff jammed into your thing to make it more fine-tuned. Cool thing is, there's a lot of open source out there. Of course, Databricks' open source model, DALL-E, is one of this very commercially friendly license, and it's getting much better quality. Open source is getting better. It's rapidly evolving. Some of your open source models that were available commercially, like DALL-E, have been released by Databricks, and really it's one of the first open source instruction models for commercial use. And it's really come a long way. That come out. Other models are similar to it, like Meta's Llama 2 is very similar to it. And a lot of this has gained traction since mid-2003. We just, earlier this month, we released DRBX. There's so many things coming out. One thing that's really, really, really cool about these things is if you don't like the current collection of models out there that's available to you, if you don't like them, wait till this afternoon because another one's coming out, right? It's moving that rapidly. DRBX came out earlier this year. Mistral 8x7b is out. And again, these things are all fine-tuned for different use cases. Another thing that we use, so far we've kind of compared open source to proprietary LLMs. In many LLM applications, however, it's going to take multiple tasks to kind of get involved in it. You might have to use multiple LLMs within that same kind of workflow. And a great example would be if you're using an open source LLM for like summarization and sentiment analysis, you would first have to use some sort of SaaS LLM to do that. And the approach of that we usually call chains, and we can chain these LLMs together. You'd have to use a chaining tool. One of them is called LangChain, or language chaining, right? And it's really to can integrate all these models together to create a vector database that ultimately can be used by your application. What are we getting at here? Well, I'll give you a quick use case of how this works and why you'd need multiple LLMs to answer a simple question. If I had a simple question, I saw a new product that was available in Japan, and I found that there were thousands of reviews on this new product that I was looking at in Japan. And I wanted to do a summarization and sentiment analysis of those reviews. However, since they came out in Japan, they're written in Japanese. What do I have to do to them first? First, I have to translate them. That's a different LLM. So I translate them into English. Then I want to do summarization. That's a different LLM. Now that I have them translated in English, I have them summarized, now I want to do sentiment analysis on what is the general vibe or feeling, positive or negative, about this product reviews. So that's a three-task, multi-stage LLM process. You have to use a tool like LangChain to put those tasks together in a workflow. Does that make sense? Yeah. And you can, of course, an example of a workflow, you can mix multiple sums, the initial things, parts together. This is doing exactly the same kind of thing that I just said. In this case, we're asking the question of like, hey, I have a bunch of articles, I want to get the overall sentiment. Well, I could quickly overwhelm the input length script because it's so much data, so maybe I could break it up. I could summarize it, then do sentiment and get an overall sentiment based on a summarization. You're seeing a lot of this. RAG. Yesterday I did a 4-hour show on RAG. This is a whole interesting thing, retrieval augmented generation. What's the big idea here? This is a very popular application that allows you to create a system where the model can access external data that helps improve the quality of the outcome. Earlier I used an example of an open book text. Okay, if I wanted to create an LLM or a RAG application on how to do well or pass that test, as part of the context that I would want to pass to that LLM, I'd want to have all the data in the book. I want that data in there. Or if it was a business case, I want to have my customer data or my custom stuff, whatever, my data in it. I can go out to a source and I can bring that in. I can supplement that with the right answer. Some of these things, in order to get the right answer, you have to help the model understand it right. You have to show it the right answer. Here's the set of right answers. Now let me help you help yourself find the right answer. Here's the whole stack of right answers. Choose from that. Right? It's a huge, huge thing when you want a question answered, and you really got to do multi-stage along the way. And we really want to make sure that we can pull in some relevant documents. We can pull in PDF files on documentation. If I had a question about Databricks, and I wanted to know something really specific about a Databricks product, I could go out to their support website, and I could download the PDF files on all the documentation, pull that all in the model, and be able to answer anything about that. But I'd have to get that specific, domain-specific knowledge into the model, baked in before I was able to make a really good answer. The last section we're going to get into here is really to find out more about Databricks AI. That's what we're all here for. Here's a quick note. This content is all evolving really quickly. So don't be surprised that, that if you're taking this course 1 week and then next week suddenly it's been updated and you're anticipating that, there's go a totally different direction. But as we go through this model, we're going to talk about how Databricks Intelligence Platform, or DI platform, is really going to empower you to kind of derive your business value from the AI use cases. We're also going to just delve more into developing the generative AI on Databricks and how you can solve your real-world business problems with that. So here's our platforms we're going to talk about today: Databricks AI, Delta Live Tables, workflows, and we'll get into Databricks SQL as well. If you've seen blog posts or other Databricks Academy courses or even the Databricks documentation pages, you're probably aware of seeing this image we show all the time. Hey, today we're going to really focus on that Databricks AI portion of the whole stack. And really what it is, it's a comprehensive solution for all of your AI or AI needs. It allows you to create custom or bespoke models or even fine-tune existing ones, by really ensuring that you have data security, data privacy, and also create end-to-end solutions like workflows for chaining AI, large language models together and creating workflows down the way, as well as when you're working with those models, training the models, understanding the models, ranking the models, evaluating the models. We didn't talk anything about that at all when it comes to like when you run a model. How do I know that model was good? And at the end of the day, once you run all this, we need to do monitoring, evaluation, and of course, at the same time, maintain governance as well. And again, it's a whole AI-centric platform. So, and it really, you got to collect your data sets. You can clean those data sets. You can do ETL. All that stuff you're using is good. We're really coming at this from the model side of things, where your very large models can take millions of dollars to train from a computational standpoint. Computational time in the cloud is expensive. Instead of having to train something all the way from scratch, there's a lot of the methods you can do to shortcut that. Some of these examples are using models that are already trained on large data sets. You can also do so that all you really have to do is fine-tuning of that model for your own business needs. And really and truly, this whole thing is optimized for generative AI. When it comes to, if you think about what Databricks has done in the last year, they've really been focused on updating kind of all that key parts of the data intelligence program to all work better with Gen AI. There's a lot of similarities when it's compared to kind of your conventional AI when it comes to building applications, but there's also some key differences. I mentioned to you at the very beginning of the section that we update this course often, so there's features released, things change every single day. So here at Databricks, we kind of believe that a lot of this generative AI is going to touch just about everything in the industry. Here are some things that we think are going to be some of the four main ones. Obviously with tech, it's just already being disrupted. Again, tech likes to disrupt itself over and over, right? We're seeing companies changing their products pretty significantly to keep up. Things are getting to generate content more frequently with minimal prompts, and they're getting better at creating prompts. Healthcare, summarizing patient results using image to text. These kind of things are absolutely positively going to be game changers in the ability of our healthcare providers to really better service us. My wife is a physical therapist, and she does home health. So she goes to see people. We live in Florida, so a lot of people who are geriatric or older patients. People come in, they just had a hip replacement, and they're back from the hospital day one. She helps them, learn how to get out of bed, give them some exercises so they can, get mobile and have that freedom of mobility again. And that takes physical therapy. One of the cool things she has is a pretty cool app that's now using AI. She has a tablet where she can rate their mobility, do their evaluations on this thing, and she can actually keep records on them, and she'll come back and it will show her, the progress that a patient has made. Even if she doesn't see that patient for a few weeks, she comes back, she knows all about all that data. It's right there. It's all a handout. She can touch that. It's all right there. But it's a pretty neat way to compile all that. Obviously, banking and financial services is a huge space right now. Anybody here work in banking and fintech in that space? It's huge. I heard something the other day, somebody said that something like 50% of our GDP is generated by financial services. That's crazy. Anybody ever heard that? Obviously, we're not doing as much manufacturing as we used to do, but that's a crazy number. So many use cases here when it comes to management, auditing, fraud detection, predictions, all kinds of use cases in there that are perfect, because really, what are you talking about when you're talking about financial services? You're talking about doing math. What are computers really good at? Math. Pharmaceuticals, the science now that's out there when it comes to doing things like DNA or using creating new vaccines, all this kind of stuff. Again, genomics. This is a huge, huge field. It's only growing, and all of that spends on really large data sets and really in math. Off the shelf, what are we seeing today? Another important caveat here we really haven't talked about is that relevant. You might fall into some use cases in previous slides, but maybe maybe that off the shelf is not going to be sufficient for your business. So some of these offerings can provide interesting results. You have a bot that's able to chat like a human, but how far can that get you? How's that going to be good for your business? In an enterprise, what you really need is you need things that are way more focused, more pointed. And you want to be able to build a support bot maybe instead. That you don't want a support bot that's going to suddenly start talking about politics. That's not going to be good for your business, right? You need something that's really going to stay on message and stay on focus and stay focused on your domain and your use cases. And at the same time, maintain security. So this is where the idea, or another way you can think about this is, one giant machine learning model for every use case owned by one company is really not doing it. What we're seeing now literally are millions of models for specific use cases, that are owned by multiple companies or many companies. That's the way we do it. I already told you, you have amazing data. Amazing data itself, this is going to be your differentiator, right? This is what's going to separate you from your customers. We've also, where are we headed with this? The big question is, where do we go next? What's happening next? What's the next step here? A few months ago, you might have heard, we've completed our acquisition of Mosaic ML. They're a huge leader in the platform for creating customization, generalization, and it really, Mosaic has allowed us to provide best in class when it comes for training, customization, and deploying generative AI models. They've got an amazing array of options out there. Working with the Mosaic ML team, we've helped some rapid democratization of some of our model capabilities. We've made some really cool use cases or business cases for creating generative AIs for different enterprises. And then also, the other part about this is unifying AI with their existing data stacks. We want to make sure that every stage of a machine learning lifecycle, that data and the models are kind of jointly curated so they can keep track of your data, make sure your data is both safe and secure. Customized models, secure environment, no risk of data leaks or your intellectual protection or intellectual property leaks. We also want to make sure that, again, that your data is your differentiator. So to wrap it up for today, as we approach our 1250 barrier and we all turn into pumpkins, how do we really find success with generative AI, and how do we plan for adoption? Well, if you might feel, don't worry if you're not alone, you might feel all of a sudden you have a significant decision to make when it comes to regarding AI. What is possible in the organization? What's feasible use cases? What's it going to cost? How do I even get started, right? Over the next several slides, we're going to as we wrap this up, we're going to talk about some discussion about some of the steps you're going to have to adopt if you want to embrace change. First, a lot of folks are saying you really kind of maybe need to act with urgency. This is a pivotal moment in history, we like to say. And we really want to act sooner than later, start having a conversation with your organization about some of the potential benefits. Second, you want to educate yourself on AI fundamentals. Being here right now, here today, you're doing just that. So thank you for being here. Doing things that are going to advance your knowledge about the subject, like taking this course, are going to help you better navigate and understand. I wouldn't stop there. I would absolutely encourage you to get your team better educated. Look at some of the offerings we have in machine learning space. Look at some of the things we have in generative AI. Look at some of the more specific courses we have in RAG. Really take time to learn this stuff. You're not going to be able to make the leap without being educated first. Right? Next, develop a strategy. It's easy to get lost in a sea. I've already talked about 100 different LLMs in the last hour alone. It's easy to get caught up and lost in the limitless possibilities out there. Take the time to kind of develop a strategy and what does it look like and what do you need to focus on for your business and how feasible it is. And then really maybe identify one of the highest value use cases for your organization. What would be low-hanging fruit, high-value use case for your organization? What's something that you could start looking at? And then get after it. This is going to require investment, not just investment in terms of money, but investment in time and investment in your people. Again, crucial to prioritize your investment in education to ensure your staff can efficiently support your initiatives. Equally important to think about reskilling or upskilling your employees to effectively work with AI. One of the greatest questions I ever got in the world of training, I've been in training for 15 years, but I had a customer once say to me, well, listen, Wes, what if I train all my employees, spend a ton of money training my employees on this new technology, then they get up and leave? And my answer to them was, what if you don't train your employees on new technology and they stay? Now what do you got, right? What's the better trade-off there, right? We all evolve our skills, right? We all evolve our skills down the road, and it's really essential to think about that. The last thing I want to talk about today is really that kind of the ethical and legal considerations. I mentioned that very briefly at the very beginning. We're going to explore the upcoming modules. We're going to talk about some of the risks and challenges associated, and this stuff is not to be trifled with. Again, here's a strategic roadmap for AI adoption. And this is where you kind of think about your people and people in adoption. Really think about your monitoring applications, your design architecture. Think about your business use case. Start really by defining a strategy at the very beginning as you move your way up to the very end. So let's wrap this puppy up. Let's talk about, and again, we're here to help you. We've got professional services. We can help you. We can help you train to upskill your team. And of course, we have solution architect folks out there who are ready, willing, and able to help you help yourself learn what you got to do it. But let's talk really quick about the delve into the potential risks of intelligence associated with generative AI. Let's talk about some legal considerations, ethical considerations, and what are about human AI integration. First of all, let me say it out loud. We've all seen Terminator. No, the machines are not going to get so smart that they decide that they don't need us and kill us all. They're just not that smart. They're really not. And we're going to have some governance in place to watch out for that. But again, legal issues, privacy, security are probably the biggest ones. Intellectual property protection, right? There's a ton of artists out there right now who are really concerned that their artwork is being hijacked to be used by Gen AI. Last year, you guys remember in Hollywood, the writers' strike? They had a big writers' strike in Hollywood. What was the number one concern that the writers wanted in their contract? They wanted to make sure that any AI-generated content based on their writing, that they got compensated for it. In other words, it's pretty easy for you to take, if they've got, think about a popular show like NCIS, that show has been around for 20 years, and they spawned like a half dozen spin-offs, NCIS Miami, NCIS Los Angeles, NCIS Las Vegas. So you got 100 episodes, you got 20 seasons, that's 2,000 episodes. You can feed all of that right now into a large language model, parse it out, and say, create an episode of the NCIS. It starts with the dead body in a park. The next thing you know, it just goes, right? We learn something interesting about the background of this person, and it goes through the whole thing. It's pretty formulaic. And again, there's those writers have an absolutely a right to protect their intellectual property for somebody using their successful formula for creating additional content, even if it's not the exact same thing. Ethical issues, bias and misinformation, okay? We're already seeing this, okay? We saw this happening in political campaigns, not just in the US, but around the world. Listen, every single bad actor and good actor on the planet is vying for your attention. Everybody is trying to influence your thoughts. Not just a business or a restaurant wants to get you hungry for a Big Mac, but they also want you to think it's cool to drive a certain kind of car or wear a certain kind of shoes, right? Everything, we're bombarded all day long with information that's good, bad, and ugly, but there's also a lot of misinformation out there, right? All kinds of articles coming out being created by troll farms or bots from bad actors that are out there trying to convince you that the sky is falling, the world's the worst it's ever been, things are only getting worse. There's nothing but crime and violence everywhere. There's no sense in going on. Forget about it. Bias. Bias is something that we don't always think about. I mentioned it earlier when I talked about media kind of things, but bias is also something to be concerned about when it comes to when you're creating data sets. There's a famous use case several years ago. This is an early adopter. The Seattle Police Department was trying to create a facial recognition software to help them use it on cameras around the city and to identify people and maybe figure out who was good and who was bad. And the data set that they used for the facial recognition was their mugshot notebooks that they had for years and years. They had hundreds of thousands of pictures of criminals over the years. And they just fed those in there as part of their AI model. Great, right? No, not good, okay? As a person of color myself, one of the first things it said was, okay, if you're a person of color, well, obviously you're a criminal. According to my data set, all black people are bad. This is terrible. The data set itself was biased. Therefore, the machine itself is using that data to make decisions. I see a person of color. Well, according to my data set, you must be bad. Most likely you're bad. It's terrible. They literally got sued. That system was shut down. And a lot of folks came in and said, what were you thinking? And like, well, you know, what data should we use? Well, maybe you should thought that through before you came out with that. But at the end of the day, there's a ton of use cases where the data that's being fed system is not what you think it is, right? It could be severely biased. I'll give you another use case. I used to work for Amazon, and my old boss left our training team and went to work for Alexa. And when she got there, this is in 2016 or so, when Alexa was first coming out. She was the only woman on the team, okay? She was also the only person on the team that had children. Who was the rest of the team? Yeah, 20-something-year-old dudes, okay? So what do you think a lot of the questions and answers and a lot of the biases that were built into Alexa from the very beginning were from? What's a 20-year-old dude think? That's where the data set came from. They did a lot of their model training. A lot of the model training was done by their team of 15 or so people, and it was all 20-year-old guys. Couldn't answer questions about anything having to do with parenting. None of them were parents. Couldn't answer any questions about anything to do with kids. None of them were kids. To this day, did you know, to this day, Alexa has a bias for a male voice? Every single day, my wife, any women here try to say to Alexa and it didn't hear you, then your spouse or partner goes, Alexa, turn on the lights, and it does it. Why is that? Because that system is inherently biased. It was trained by millions of repetitions of male voices. It understands male voices better than it understands female voices because they didn't have any women on their team. That is inherently biased into the product. These are the kind of things that you need to think about down the road. Legal considerations, right? A lot of current models don't have any kind of forgetting information for personal data. So if you're doing credit card fraud and you're doing analysis and you're putting in credit card numbers, guess what? That's in the data set and it's there forever. If you don't clean that stuff, you don't wipe it, that stuff's going to be caught in there. That's really bad. Most of the large amounts of data include personal stuff, and a lot of that's going to violate people's personal privacy rights. If you're doing business in the EU, that's for sure going to violate their GDPR regulations, which also require that all data on anybody who's an EU citizen reside in a machine on EU soil. That's the law. And then everybody in the EU has the right to see what data is being held about them and what data you have and how they're using it. Businesses may be responsible also for any kind of violation when it comes to what you've done. So if your Gen AI application violates somebody's personal PII or rights or privacy rights or broadcast information, you could be legally held liable for that. That's a big deal. Using existing data privacy strategy, again, you need to block that kind of stuff. So you could, if you're already doing it, keep doing it. Define the types of content or permission or consent you want to require. Provide employee training on data privacy. Make sure your employees know what are the company policies, what should you use. If you're using any kind of proprietary or off-the-shelf stuff, make sure you understand what kind of data is being collected and how it's being used. Some best practices, make sure you're using anonymization or encryption or have access controls around that data so that it's not being publicly available. Put some safeguards or guardrails in place and disclose sensitive data during your training or inference. Also make sure you have a data governance model, version control, as well as monitoring along the way. Data leakage, big deal. A lot of Gen AI models have the potential to leak data. And what that means is it includes essential confidential data, could be leaked inside the model. And here, again, this is why a lot of companies right now do not want their employees to use open source models because they're afraid that data could be leaked in the training, other people get their hands on it. Something you have to be aware of, something you have to be compensating for. Prompt injection. You could insert specific instruction or prompt with any input that's going to manipulate the normal behavior of an LLM. Sometimes we could generate malicious code, stick it in there. We could instruct an agent to give wrong information. We could also use all this stuff for bad. We could reveal confidential information. So code injection has always been a concern out there, but it becomes really big in this kind of thing. We could also have a redirect of information. In other words, you could have people saying, okay, take all the information I'm getting, give them the answer back, but also store that somewhere else so I can use it later for evil or for good. It can be used to accelerate or generate harmful content. Hear me now, believe me later. They're already using Gen AI to create malicious code to do bad things. The only good news on that story is they're also using AI to create security systems as well. So now you got robots fighting robots. This is the world we live in. And it's a game of cat and mouse. You build your wall higher, we build a bit taller ladder. You build your wall higher, we build a drone. You build your wall higher, it's never going to end. That battle of spy versus spy will never end. Intellectual property, we kind of already talked about that. You need to make sure that your organization is not out there stealing images, stealing content from other places. That's protected. It's always we think about licensing issues. And you really need to talk to your legal department about that. Litigation, again, it's a big risk. Companies are run by lawyers, right? At the end of the day, you're exposing yourself to significant risk or lawsuits if you're out there. Again, we're talking about a person who committed suicide after gotten a chat with a chatbot. I mean, that's just crazy, right? Last but not least, I want to get into ethical considerations, and this is just a couple slides and I'll let you go. But we want to talk about, examine some potential risks and challenges on some of the bias in AI systems. We already mentioned that. We first talked about fairness and bias in data. It's important to understand that really the size of that data and the quality of data are two important things, but data doesn't have to necessarily mean having big data doesn't mean it's a good thing. Human biases in data to social perceptions, stereotypes, historical factors, perceived notions, cultural influences, past experience. In one study, ChatGPT 3, they generated sentences that were analyzed for sentiment. It also revealed the critical difference between different types of sentiment scores based on the race of the person that was asking the question. And again, that is an inherent bias, and that's not something that we want to promote in any system. Biases and human biases. Again, social perceptions, stereotypes. Again, we all have all kinds of cultural influences. We all, may have think that certain types of people are bad. This is not any place, has no place in businesses, but human biases and data are real. It's out there. Preconceived notions or general conceptions. Again, it's out there, it happens. On annotated human biases in data collection, models could be annotated by fine-tuned with human feedback. Again, this kind of bias could reflect errors and limitations in human judgment and reasoning. Again, sampling error, confirmation bias. A lot of times, if I was going to run a survey and I wanted to find out people's opinions, and I just wanted to talk to people on the street, what part of the city I stood on the street corner and interviewed people would dramatically impact the answers that I got, right? Different neighborhoods have different kind of people. And I'm going to get different answers based on where I stand to get those results. That's important, understanding that. People who compile data also have we always have this thing about data confirmation bias. We tend to believe things, we tend to see things the way we believe them. If we have a preconceived notion, this is the way it should be, we look for data that supports what we believe. And we tend to ignore things that don't relate to what I know. Well, that's not been my experience. That's probably a bad data point. I never heard of that. I'd ignore it. That's bad. Yeah. Last but not least, let's get into it here. Some other biases is this bias reinforcement loop. Again, it's the input data triggers a bias in the model. In simpler terms, it's the AI model can learn some bias data and it subsequently regenerates bias results. This is super bad. It's something we have to be aware of, and we have to understand that the reliability and accuracy of a system is directly related to the data we go in. We talked about hallucination earlier. This is where it comes back with things that are absolutely not possible. It sounds plausible, but it's not. Some of these things can be very convincing down the road. And really, without getting into a lot of the technical details, we could talk about really hallucination. There's intrinsic and extrinsic, but at the end of the day, know that it's a real thing. Anytime you run an application, you need to understand what are the parameters, the output. In other words, what is the right answer? If I'm looking for a numerical answer between 1 and 100, and I get an answer that's 10,000, I know automatically that's bad, but I need to understand what the right answer I'm looking for. I need to have an understanding of that to make sure that I'm getting those reliable and accurate results. How can we do this? Data bias, all right? You can mitigate some of those risks associated with that. You have to kind of have a comprehensive approach. Combat data bias. Examine your data in slices and consider updating data more frequently. Address toxic models that require a multifaceted approach. When you're dealing with misinformation and information hazards, it's important to scrutinize the source of your data. Pay attention to this curating data or fine-tune your data from your model to ensure accuracy and reliability. We talked about that a little bit. And again, you want to have some sort of governance. You want to have some audit place. This tends to be kind of a feedback loop where you do application audit over your model audit, over what is coming out of your audit. At the end of the day, if you're not auditing what you're doing and taking time to really put some human eyeballs on the output, you're setting yourself up for failure. Does that make sense? Right? When we talk about this whole thing at the beginning of this thing, we talked about, is this really, is the hype all real? Yeah. At the end of the day, I'll just kind of say this. AI is not going to steal your job. The person who knows how to use AI is going to steal your job. Right? It's going to make your job more efficient or less efficient. But at the same time, there's a lot of impacts that we need to think about. There's pros and cons along the way. I want to wrap this whole thing up with asking you a question. Does anybody out there have any questions about anything I've covered so far today? By the way, I am like 3 minutes over time, so if you guys are done, go have lunch, have a great day. But I will, thank you, but I will hang out and answer questions for you all.